Hey, thanks for joining me today for episode number 73 of Podcasting Your Brand. I'm your host, producer Jemmy, providing practical lessons for you to podcast your brand. And today I'm going to be bringing you my next Podcasting 102 topic, springboarded off of the last episode, mobile podcasting to level up. This episode is brought to you by my own brand, Flintstone Media. Listen in and let's do this. First, by starting with one of my daily tips. Hey, it's producer Jemmy with your tip for today. And I want to encourage you when you're editing, especially when you're editing the first episode or two, your trailer, episodes 1, 2, 3, whatever, create a template for yourself with whichever DAW or editing platform that you use. Create a template project file for your show. And then you're going to copy and paste it into a new project file for each and every single episode. But basically what this allows you to do is it cuts down your editing time. It cuts down the thinking time. You basically can just plop things where they go. So in that project file, you can have your intro music bed already pre-leveled and set. You can have any of your segment bumpers kind of set in there. You just have to slide them into place then. And your outro music, same thing, your ads, all that kind of stuff. Just have them already set into a project file for yourself. So the only thing that really changes much from one episode to the other are the vocals. So then at that point, all you have to do is edit the vocals and then drop them in where they are supposed to go. So come back here for more tips every single day. I'm podcasting your brand. I'm producer Jemmy. So be sure to subscribe to me on social media, TikTok, Clapper, Instagram, YouTube, etc., so you get all of my tips and you get them first. Now, I also want to remind you that I have workshops. So if you want to work with me in a group setting where I can interact with you live, then if you want to launch a workshop or if you want to level up the podcast that you already have, if you want to launch a podcast or level up the podcast that you already have, those are the words, then you can work with me, toppodcastworkshop.com. I'm so excited to work with you to get you going on your podcasting or to just level it up. I'm also very excited to be heading to Mom 2.0, and you'll find out in a minute here what I'm planning on doing while I'm there. But let's get on to today's lesson because my first show that I ever did was called Curve the Cube, and it was a mobile show, as I discussed on episode 72. I went and met people where they were, but I was accidentally brilliant when I went to my first podcast conference and turned it into an episode, because that's when I really truly understood the power of doing this stuff on a bigger level. So the impact was unbelievable, and this is where I learned this lesson and so many other lessons I'm going to be giving you today. So let's get into how mobile podcasting can help you level up your podcast. So as I discussed on episode 72, mobile podcasting can be a phenomenal way just to add something new and different to the scope of your show, or to do a show that stands out differently from all the other shows because everybody else is only recording virtually. So if you can record mobile, whether it's once in a while or all the time, try to do it. Definitely go for it. And if you are unsure of the reasons why this is so exciting and great, go back to episode 72 and check that out. But what is something I didn't really highlight enough is that when you're doing mobile podcasting, you're able to take advantage of the space in real time. And you can't do that when you're connecting virtually. Like I might be able to mention, a plant or something on the wall that I see over my guest's head. But if I'm actually in their space, I'm able to pull from a lot more and add to the conversation so much more and just get a better understanding of who my guest is, which allows for better flow of the conversation. So that's one thing I wanted to just rewind and reiterate in case you missed it in episode 72, but also something extra. If you do this often enough that you have guests that are local to you, it makes one extra thing that you can do for your guest experience that much better and easier. Because one thing that I'll get into on another episode is part of the guest experience cycle is being able to offer your guests some sort of swag, some sort of gift, some sort of thank you afterwards. And if that is a physical gift, it is a million times easier to do that when you're meeting them in person. So when I would do my Curve the Cube interviews, for example, I would just bring something with me. Sometimes on our Finding Florida trips, we would bring things with us. So we had Finding Florida mugs or whatever, and we were able to give those to people. So them being able to receive a gift right in front of us. We took pictures with it. We recorded it on as part of the show, like all those things. That's an experience you cannot have unless you're doing mobile podcasting. So again, I hope I can convincing you. And if you want to see the results of and Do not pay attention to the audio quality because it was my first show. Okay. But Curve the Cube podcast, I'll put a link in the show notes to it, was almost all done via mobile podcasting. So it's a great, great shining example of how to do it and what it can really add when you're having a conversation in someone's setting. But okay, here's what I wanted to really dive into on this episode is how to take that concept of being able to take your show out of your studio and go and be other places, how taking that concept can really help level up your show when you take the concept itself to the next level. So, for example, number one, use local events and networking opportunities to your advantage. Have your mobile setup at the ready and always with you when you're going someplace. Because if you're at a networking event, if you're at a community event, whatever it is, you never know when you might meet someone there who would be perfect for your show. And instead of saying, hey, can I book you for the future? Maybe we can schedule you another, which is great. There's nothing wrong with that. But if you have your system right there with you, being able to capture them, you're getting it. There's no chance for something to fall apart in the system, the scheduling or what have you. And this never happened. Now it's happened. It's captured. It's caught. And also, again, it's something different. So it'll be a new fun experience for them. It'll be fun experience for your listeners to hear you capture something like that in real time. So for example, you can go to, and it can apply to meetup events. It can apply to community events. So if let's say you have a show about artists who are trying to, do different kinds of art, then you can go to a local art festival. I was just in downtown Delray, Florida, and there's an art festival there, a Green Market. I was like, imagine if I had a show, if I was doing Curve the Cube still, I would take my mobile equipment and I would be able to interview so many people on the spot because they were doing what they love for a living or as a side hustle, whatever, and it works right into my show. So think about what local events or anything like that, networking events, does your school, like your old alma mater, did they have a local event? Whatever it is there anything local to you that you can go and be a part of? And even if you've done this before and it's never occurred to you, oh my gosh, this could be an opportunity to record my podcast. Now make it a habit of always bringing your equipment with you because you never know. There could be a great interview opportunity just waiting for you. The second thing I want to mention is when you're trying to do a mobile podcast, there are 3 types of organizations who can be your new best friend. Okay. Number 1, your local visitors bureau, because your local visitors bureau, they're charged with their entire mission is bringing in dollars from outside, from outside the area to spend money here. So by reaching out to your local visitors bureau, they will have a whole slew of local vendors and businesses and things that they are trying to get exposure for. And so they might be able to hook you up with some really great interviews and grease the wheels for those yeses. Similarly, your local SBA, your Small Business Association, they are charged with the same thing, getting people to spend money. The difference is the Visitors Bureau is charged with getting people from outside the area to spend money. Your Small Business Association is charged with getting people from within the area to spend money. So how can you work with them to see if they're people to interview, or maybe they can be some sort of sponsor, or maybe they can help grease the wheels to getting you into events and things like that, which I'll talk to you in a second about media passes, but they might be able to help be really, really solid partners with you, help planning some things. You never know. So reach out to your local Visitors Bureau and your local Small Business Association. Let them know about your show. Even if it's not a geolocal show, it doesn't have to be a geolocal show. If you are explaining that part of what you do in your show is this mobile outreach, this local outreach, because you have a mobile setup, that they're going to be very excited to meet with you and talk with you and try to be a part of what you have going on. So there also could be a local cultural council or something of that nature that wants to help you. So look to your local organizations where you can actually walk in their door, shake their hand, and form a relationship. Okay. So that was our visitors bureaus and small business associations. But I said that there were 3. The third, your local media, your local radio. So it's radio, newspapers, magazines, bloggers, all those kinds of things. Because again, even if your show isn't geolocal, even if your show isn't specifically highlighting your town, your area, these people will still want to talk to you because you are local. You are a story. So if you're doing something awesome in podcasting, then your local newspaper will want to talk to you about it. And what's great is by having this relationship with your local media, I've been reached out to now because I formed a relationship with them in the past. I've been reached out to have a quote put into an article. I never would have known that they were even writing this article in order to put myself into it, to pitch myself as a contributing, quote person. But I had reached out to them before. We had done an article together before. So I was on their roster of people to reach out to if they were ever doing a feature story on podcasting, media, mobile devices, anything like that. So reach out to your local media, get involved with them, because then if they're ever doing a story, you can be a great resource and contributing a quote to that story. And now you're getting free publicity on all of their platforms. So visitors bureaus, small business associations, and your local media. So I've done this very, very well for both Curve the Cube, which I mentioned was a show that was mobile podcasting only because I interviewed someone different every episode and I went to their space. I also use these techniques for growing Finding Florida. Finding Florida was a beast of a show in a good way. I have so much love and affection for Finding Florida. But Finding Florida was a show where every month we went on to a different town. So we did several stops at one place every month and then mashed that all together in an episode or two. So two very different experiences, very different ways to do mobile podcasting. But I learned a lot through the process. So the first thing I want to encourage you to do, I talked about local networking events and things, but you really can use conferences to your advantage, whether they're local or not. So the local thing, just have it on your radar so you can be to as many as you can. Okay. But conferences that serve your industry that your show is serving and the audience that you're serving, those conferences, you need to go and attend and use them to your advantage. So in my case, for example, travel and tourism conferences for Finding Florida made a lot of sense. Comic-Con conferences and anything else where someone's expressing themselves made a lot of sense for Curve the Cube. So what makes sense for your show? Is your show about animal rescue? Then maybe some pet-related conferences would be great for you. Is your show about entrepreneurship or anything of that nature? Maybe some tech conferences would be really great for you. So think about what industry your show serves, what audience your show serves, and try to go to those conferences. Now, when you go to those conferences, you're going to bring your equipment. Okay. So this is similar to what I did for Curve the Cube, and I'll put a link in the show notes for this episode. This is what I meant, but I was accidentally brilliant. So in 2017, I went to my first podcast convention and I decided I wanted to, since I was interviewing people on my show anyway about what they're doing, what they love for a living. It's like, well, let me go to this conference, interview a bunch of people about podcasting. But then I thought, I don't want a whole bunch of episodes in a row of this is a podcaster talking about how they did it for a living. Then this is a podcaster talking about how they did it for a living. I didn't want 12 episodes in a row. Instead, I thought, let me do it different. I use what's called a vox pop method. Now, it's also called a man on the street kind of thing. If you think about late night television, they'll send someone out to just ask the same question to several people just because the answers are so interesting and different. Similar thing. I went to different podcasters and I said, tell me about why you love podcasting and how you're doing it for a living. Go. Right. And then they answered their questions. And it was 5 minutes, maybe 10-minute max interviews, little mini interviews. And then I mashed them all together for one all-encompassing episode. And I interviewed mostly other podcasters, so mostly the attendees. I can't remember if I interviewed any vendors at that point. I don't think I did. And I don't think I was clever enough to interview a bunch of speakers, but I did I did interview attendees and I did pull people as they were getting off the award ceremony stage, as they were coming down. I was like, oh, I want to interview you. So I also interviewed the organizer for PodFest, Chris Kermitsos. That was the first time I got to talk to him. So from a networking standpoint, it was phenomenal, because I was talking to people. But PodFest loved it because now there was a whole episode that basically illustrated the power and beauty and awe and wonder and joy that is PodFest. So they loved it. So and everyone who's attended, they loved it because now they got to be part of that show. So interview attendees, interview speakers. I didn't think about that on that on that trip, but other conferences I did think about that. That light bulb did go off. So interview speakers, interview vendors too. Interview vendors, especially because those vendors could also be really awesome sponsors for you. So build that relationship, interview some vendors on the expo floor of the conference, and then interview the organizers too. And here's the thing. Yeah, you can go to a conference and you can be business casual like everybody else, but why do that? You were born to stand out. So stand out. Wear some branded swag. Wear your shirt. Wear your hat. Whatever you have that is branded for you, wear it. On your microphones, when you're walking around, have a mic flag. If you can order a mic flag, there are lots of companies out there. Just Google mic flags. Those are mic flags are the square cubes that go underneath the head of the mic on the top of the handle, right above where your hand is holding it, and it shows the logo of your show. So if you can get that branded, you can have that. So the point is that when you're walking around the conference and you're conducting these interviews, you're getting attention, which is good. People are seeing your swag. They can see what the show name is without even having to ask. They're excited to watch someone being interviewed. The person being interviewed is excited to be the center of attention in that way. And then, of course, everyone's excited for the episode to come out. But the point is to go not necessarily dressed in business casual, dressed in your branded outfit. So people understand who you are and they are drawn to you and they want to be a part of it. So I'm going to put a link in the show notes to Curve the Cubes, episode 110, the Podfest 2017 episode, because it illustrates this beautifully. Now, the next level up from this concept, of course, is to apply for media passes. So a media pass is going to get you in the door, typically for free, and be typically almost all access, if not all access. So you have to be aware ahead of time. So go right now to Google, search in your industry for conferences related to your subject matter, and get on their newsletters and whatnot. You want to know as soon as they are starting to organize that conference so you can apply for media passes as soon as that application is open and available. So you're going to get that media passes, and then you're going to be able to, and also explain that you're putting an episode together that's going to really showcase what they're all about. And that's going to create a FOMO for any attendees who are any of your listeners who didn't attend this year. It's going to create FOMO for them next year. So all these little details will help you get accepted for media passes. So you want to get those media passes, get yourself into all the different things. Like I said, I'll put a link in the show notes for a lot of different stuff. But 2 links I want to include, 2 episodes of Finding Florida, where this really came into play. I want to illustrate the power of this. So episode 4B was called Around the State in One Day. It was very early on in the show's life. And Visit Florida is the #1 travel and tourism industry in Florida. It's the main industry or main travel and tourism hub. So by knowing that, by researching that, and then getting on their newsletter, I found out very early that there was a conference coming up called Florida Huddle. And it was not too far from me, happening in Fort Lauderdale. It's called Florida Huddle, and it was going to basically be all the visitors bureaus and a whole bunch of Florida attractions and venues under one roof. So all the people that we needed to connect with in order to see the success of our show and to see it flourish and grow. So, of course, we wanted to not only go, I'm turning this to Dr. Seuss rhyme, I didn't mean to. Of course, we not only wanted to go, but we wanted to get media passes, So we got media passes, and it was great because we got to interview a representative from like 12 or 13 different visitors bureaus. And each of those interviews lent itself, parlayed itself, and grew itself into a future episode. And they were so excited to work with us because they got the experience of being interviewed on our show. They got to see that we're professional, but we're also fun, and that we have a big vision, and we're going to do a lot of good stuff, and that we get it. We're trying to bring in tourism dollars, or trying to talk about the town, what makes people want to come in, like they got it, right? It was illustrated right then and there at the Florida Huddle conference, which then made every single opportunity an attempt by us to work with them to do a future episode and an adventure in Daytona or Tampa or Sarasota or whatever, gonna grease those wheels, and we were in. So easy peasy. And again, we got got media passes for that, which made it even better. And then the other one I want to mention that we also got media passes for is a little bit later in the life of Finding Florida. This is episode 16B, but I'll put it in the show notes in case you're wondering why is it 16B? We were experimenting at the time. To side note, we were experimenting at the time. Each adventure had a preview episode, so we would talk about where we were going before we went, and it was a lot of fun. Well, some of my favorite stuff is in those, but we would call those the A episodes, and the adventures the B and sometimes C episodes. So 16B. We eventually dropped this name designation, but 16B was the adventure episode. But anyways, we went to the Miami International Boat Show. We got invited, okay? And so we got media passes. So we were able to go around and talk to all kinds of people and record, essentially. And they knew that we were going to be putting together an episode about the Miami Boat Show, right? They loved it. The organizer was all about it. But here's what was awesome. So one of the first people we saw was Freedom Boat Club. Okay. Now, Freedom Boat Club is pretty well known down here in Florida. You don't have to own a boat. You just pay a membership fee. They own the boats. They pay the dock fees, do the maintenance, all that stuff. When you want to go out on the water, you just go over there and they lend you a boat for the day. Right. And so it's really great. So Freedom Boat Club. So I wanted to interview them. And so we interviewed them. They had a fantastic time being interviewed by us. They said to us, hey, we've just launched a sister brand, Freedom RVing. How can we work with you? Ding, 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 ding. Music to our ears. Yes, please. We love this conversation. So they ended up lending us an RV for an entire weekend a couple months later. And so we did this trip where we went down the west coast of Florida, stopping at different RV parks and different small towns and just having fun. But the highlight was we had this RV the whole time. So that RV episode wouldn't have happened if we hadn't met them and been able to talk to them on that level at the Miami Boat Show. And that happened because we asked for media passes. You see how this all flows? And it all helped us level up constantly. It helped us get our word out. Networking to the max, relationship building to the max. It just brought everything up another notch. So both episode 4B and 16B of Finding Florida will be linked in the show notes for you as well, because they're great illustrations of how all this can be done. But essentially how it works is getting to know what conferences are out there. So both what's local to you, what conferences, events, all those kind of opportunities. Then what's industry-based and audience-based, what's out there that you would be willing to travel to, and getting those on your calendar. And then applying for media passes, okay? But then also one more thing I want to add. Take some time before you go to the conference to take note of who the speakers are, what the schedule is, and that way you can know if there's anyone in particular you want to target to get on your show. And then also filling in some space so that you have time to mingle and mix, because you could end up randomly bumping into another great interview. So looking at the schedule for the conference before you attend. So, okay, number one, becoming aware of what's local and what conferences are happening. Then number two, attending and applying for media passes. And number three, planning that trip so that you can know what speakers are going to be happening, what vendors are going to be there, and you can try to interview the people that you want to interview, including the organizers. Then step four, just put together a really awesome episode and watch the relationship magic happen. Now let's end with one more of my daily tips. Be sure to subscribe to me on all the social medias, YouTube, TikTok, Clap. You get the idea. Subscribe to me on all the social media so you get all the tips and you get them first. I don't want anybody left behind. And if there's anything that you want me to address in particular on a tip or future episode, just email me, Jaime, Jaime at flintstonemedia.com. And if you are using this show to help your show grow, let me know also by emailing me, and I'll put a little link to your show on podcastingyourbrand.com. Okay, this is producer Jaime signing off for now, but remember, there's nothing more powerful. I'm going to get it right one of these days. There's nothing more powerful than the sound of your voice. So turn that mic on and come back next week, because next week we have Mark Ronick, who's going to be talking about using ChatGPT for streamlining and avoiding plagiarism. Super key and important when you're talking about protecting your content. And after that, Sean Savage is joining in for using music in your podcasting. So keep on coming back, podcastingyourbrand.com. Right now, let's go check out my next daily tip. Hey, it is producer Jimmy with your tip for today. Now, if you've put out both a video and an audio version of your show, I want you just to keep this in mind. When a video version of your podcast is being consumed, the person who's watching it has both their eyes and their ears being hit with senses. That means that anything that they're visually seeing is distracting from any audio issues there may be. So you may not need to edit as much, but for the audio only consumer, you need to consider doing a little bit more editing. Now, this does not apply to any shows that are more that need that live to drive feel. But if you do have a show that needs some editing, the audio only version doesn't have the visuals to distract it. So your consumer is hearing everything. So you need to edit that with a little bit heavier hand. Now, my next tip will help you cut down on your editing time. So you want to make sure you keep coming back and come back every day. Podcastingyourbrand.com. I'm producer Demi.